Hey everybody, how are you? I wanted to talk a little bit about underrated guitar players. We hear so much about overrated guitar players. I have a little list of guitar players I think are underrated, so I hope you'll watch. We have all these lists of overrated guitar players, and Clapton and Jimmy Page, and I think I've done a couple videos on are the Beatles overrated, is Hendrix overrated, and at some point everybody's overrated, and you look at some of these lists of people who are overrated and there's nobody left. I mean, every single great guitar player we all know and love is overrated, so there's nobody left. It's kind of like the Lilliputians pulling down Gulliver in greatness. These people are great. But it made me think a little bit about underrated guitar players. So I wanted to talk a little bit about. I have a little list here of underrated guitar players that I just thought I'd share. Just a couple quick things. I'm also not picking session players. I did a video a while back. I'll put a link to it. Guitar solos we took for granted, about some of my favorite guitar solos that we never really kind of noticed, not like Stairway to Heaven or Freebird, but kind of great guitar solos that fly under radar. I'll put a link to that, but most of the people on that were session players, so I'm not going to count session players or people that are behind the scenes in the Wrecking Crew or something, even though they're definitely deserving. But I'm talking about band players that I think are kind of underrated today. They don't get enough credit, and sometimes I don't think we remember them as much. The first one I put down was Rod the Bottle Price from Foghat. Foghat was huge, and I don't think we hear them much anymore. You might hear Slow Ride or, once in a while. But they had so many good songs, and Rod the Bottle Price is one of the great guitar players of rock history, and definitely one of the great slide players. And when you hear people talk about slide players, I don't think his name comes up enough. Man, he was just an awesome slide player. On all those Foghat tunes, you would hear so much good slide guitar, and that was all Rod the Bottle Price, and just good guitar just in general. And I think I saw them, and Lonesome Dave Peverett was the singer that had that great rock and roll voice, and he played a really good rhythm guitar and some real solid leads. But that Rod the Bottle Price sounded like Fool for the City, Drive Me Home, Stone Blue, I Just Want to Make Love to You, all those songs, and they were on the Home in My Hand. They were on the radio all the time, and he's just one of the great slide players that has ever picked up a bottleneck, and I don't think he gets enough credit, so I put him at the top of the list. And Foghat was just a super duper good band, especially some of their early and mid 70s stuff, like Fool for the City, and just great. The second one I put down was Randy Bachman from both the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive. What a great guitar player and songwriter, just real solid. And if you listen to those old Bachman Turner Overdrive records or the Guess Who, you always hear just perfect guitar parts. And he was a good lead guitar player, not real flashy, but he was just kind of one of those real in-the-pocket, solid, professional lead guitar player. Still is, he's still around. But I feel like he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. And I even remember, maybe some of you can clarify in my mind, but about 30 years ago or something, there was some guy that was claiming to be Randy Bachman and kind of a Randy Bachman imposter. And Randy Bachman had been missing so much that he kind of was walking around saying he was Randy Bachman for a while. Now I notice Randy Bachman's around a little bit, but I think one of the things that happens is some of the people I'm mentioning haven't played as much, whereas Aerosmith and some of these other bands have kept playing all along. It just shows you how important it is to keep playing out there. But Bachman Turner Overdrive, and that's that classic 2 guitars, bass, and drums, just 2 guitar band, not that much keyboards. But oh man, Not Fragile, BTO2, The first album with Blue Collar. My personal favorite is Roll On Down the Highway, but I remember Not Fragile. I was in junior high, and that was sort of one of the quintessential junior high, 1974 era bands. I mean, everybody loved Bachman Turner Overdrive, and I maybe you hear Taking Care of Business once in a while, but man, they were great. And Randy Bachman was the leader of that great band, and the Guess Who too. He wrote These Eyes, American Woman with Burton Cummings. What a great guitar player. The third one I put down is Gary Richrath from REO Speedwagon. Just a great guitar player. And, I especially would point to some of the earlier REO Speedwagon stuff. I think REO 2 is probably one of the best rock and roll albums I've ever bought. REO 2 is a terrific album with Music Man, Keep Pushing On, 157 Riverside Avenue, Little Queenie, and one of the great, the kind of their freebird for a long time was Golden Country, and he just has some great guitar playing in that, just great. And it's really kind of sad what happened. REO took a turn for kind of commercial pop rock, power ballads and things, and I don't think Gary Richrath really agreed with that. I guess you could argue it was a good decision commercially because a lot of REO's most familiar stuff is actually the kind of MTV era stuff when they weren't as guitar solo oriented. But man, he was a great guitar player. R.I.P. Gary Richrath. The next one was Jay Geils from the Geils Band, and another band I don't think we hear that much anymore. But he was just, if you ever listen to those old Jay Geils Band, he was kind of like an old R&B type player. Like First I Look at the Purse, Looking for Love, of course Whammer Jammer, and he never had a lot of really heavy, long extended solos, but he always played really good solos, and he was a really good overall guitar player. Jay Geils and the Jay Geils Band in their earlier period was great. I'm from Detroit, and they were a Boston band, but they had a lot of Detroit fans, and I think a lot of their live albums, like Full House and that Blow Your Face Out, a lot of that was recorded in Detroit, and they were really popular when I was growing up, with Peter Wolf and Jay Geils and Magic Dick on the harmonica. But Jay Geils kind of started that band and was just a fantastic guitar player. Some of these guys were really, really, really professional, and just a very well schooled in like a lot of those old like R&B blues songs from the 50s and 60s, and he took that sensibility into the Jay Geils Band and added some juice and some good showmanship, and you came out with one of the great 70s bands, Jay Geils. The next one is Ted Nugent, and I wanted to put him down because he gets a lot of shit, and he's got a big mouth on him. He always has. But let me tell you something. Don't ever forget Ted. I don't even think we think of him as a guitar player anymore. He's one of the best rock guitar players that's ever lived. I mean, he was one of the main guitar players of classic rock. Still is. And I mean, that first Ted Nugent solo album is just ridiculously good. Hey Baby, Just What the Doctor Ordered, Snakeskin Cowboy, of course Stranglehold, Motor City Madhouse. Come on, that's such a good album. Free for All is a good album, and the Amboy Dukes were really good. And I'm from Detroit, and he was huge. He was one of the main guitar players, and he wasn't just crazy. He is a really fine guitar player. He's very tasteful. He's very creative in his songwriting. He has a sense of melody. When you listen like Just What the Doctor Ordered or Hey Baby, those are great riff songs with kind of a sense of melodic hook. He's a very tasteful, smart guitar player. He's not just crazy wild man. I know he kind of plays that up, but he is a really fine rock guitar player, Ted Nugent. And we need to remember that once in a while, because I think sometimes people forget. Yeah, he's one of the great guitar players that's ever put on a guitar. Ted Nugent. Respect. Next one is Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues, and I don't know if we ever think about the Moody Blues as rock, but I saw the Moody Blues in 1978, and they were always so good. And at that time, that shows you how old I am. That was kind of a comeback tour in 1978 because they'd quit playing in the early 70s. It was kind of a big deal. Of course, now that would have seemed so young compared to now. But Justin Hayward got out there on "I'm Just a Singer in a Rock and Roll Band" and just played that bum 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 bum. He just played a really good solo in that A minor idiom, and it was just great. I mean, they sounded so good. And he's kind of like Randy Bachman or one of those guys. He just always really tasteful stuff. And they never were known for like big dramatic solos, but man, he played some great. Lovely to See You's got some nice guitar on it. But boy, he got out there and did that guitar on "I'm Just a Singer in a Rock and Roll Band," and you just said, man, this guy knows what he's doing. He is a rock guitar player, Justin Hayward. Next one is Mick Box from Uriah Heep, a band I don't think we think that much about, but I grew up listening to Uriah Heep. You might hear me talk sometimes about how we used to listen to albums before band when I was in junior high. And then looking back on it, that was kind of where I got exposed to a lot of pretty good music, because some of my friends had older brothers and sisters, and they would bring in albums, and I was still kind of into John Denver at the time, and they would bring in like Led Zeppelin 4 or George Carlin we used to listen to. But one of the albums we listened to quite a bit was Uriah Heep Live, and that's just a really good album. July Morning, Sunrise, Sweet Lorraine, and that was sort of before they did like Easy Living and Stealin'. But his guitar playing was always really good. And again, they're kind of prog rock, but if you listen to like Sweet Lorraine and Sunrise, they're really catchy. It's not like some prog rock where you don't get a song out of it. They're really well done songs with a good melodic structure to them and good lyrics. But his guitar playing was always just excellent. And I was in a band that played quite a bit around Detroit when I was young, and could have been maybe better, made a few changes, but we were actually pretty good. But our singer was actually really good, and his signature song was "Stealin'." So I used to play the guitar solo kind of pretty close to the album, and that was always kind of one of our main songs, "Stealin'," when I should have been buying. But Mick Box is a great guitar player. Next one, Rick Derringer, great guitar player. You see him around. He's a Christian guy now, which I think's great. He's kind of like Mark Farner or some of these guys that have come to the Lord or whatever you want to say. But he still rocks out. But man, I just remember in the '70s he was one of the main kind of gunslinger guitar players. And you might hear me say I don't think they really had the concept of shredding all that much back then. Like that term, and sweeping arpeggios and things. But guys like Rick Derringer and Ted Nugent were kind of like the shredders of their day. The styles it was more a straightforward rock and roll style, but he was great. Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo. The other one I really like is Sitting by the Pool. Another good one. I don't think I just thought of him off the top of my head. I don't even think I've heard a song of his in years. Was Pat Travers. And he kind of, I think he was a little too young. He came out in the late '70s, early '80s, and right at the end of album-oriented rock when the radio formats were kind of changing, and he just kind of squeaked in under the bar with like Boom Boom, Out Goes the Lights, and that other one, Smoking and Drinking, Smoking Whiskey and Drinking something else. But I remember those were on there, and that was really good guitar playing. He had a lot of really good guitar playing. And I don't think they ever ended up playing him that much when they started calling rock classic rock. I don't think he's kind of like George Thorogood, or he kind of sneaked in right at the end of the old album-oriented rock format, but really, really great guitar player. And the last one was Steve Miller, another great guitar player. And you know what? He's kind of one of these guys that, again, like kind of maybe like Justin Hayward. You don't see him play big solos all the time, but boy, he sure could. And I remember like the early Steve Miller, even before he had a lot of his big hits like "Fly Like an Eagle" and "Big Old Jet Airliner" and Jungle Love and all those songs, Abracadabra. But I remember old Steve Miller when he did like All Along the Watchtower and Living in the USA, and those were really good, kind of vintage style, classic rock, album-oriented rock, and really Steve Miller was awesome. Great songwriter. And his guitar playing was always in the service of the song, but he was definitely a guitar oriented artist, and his good guitar playing was always front and center in those albums. He didn't have songs like Freebird, but he always did have good guitar playing kind of laced through there. Sometimes you wouldn't even hear him play a solo much, but it was always really good rhythm guitar, and when he played solos, they were always really good. So. But I just wanted to say that, we talk about overrated. I get kind of tired of that. Sometimes even kind of half ticks me off. You say all these great people are overrated. Who the hell are you to call Eric Clapton overrated? I mean, you have a 60-year career? I mean, people, the little people want to tear down greatness. It's something that you see in so many things. These people are great, but I sometimes think these names I've mentioned, they were also great, and they were also just about as popular as anybody else back in their prime. But for some reason, I don't think they get a lot of attention today. And in that sense, they definitely are underrated. Those are 10 great guitar players. Well, thanks. God bless.